By August 1945, the Allied High Command was prepared to deploy a weapon that had existed only in theory just weeks prior. While the war in Europe had ended months earlier, the Pacific was still a site of grinding attrition. Recent battles on Iwo Jima and Okinawa had seen casualty ratios drop, with Japanese defenders often fighting until they were killed or committed suicide. To break this resistance, the U.S. had already firebombed 64 Japanese cities. A single night raid on Tokyo earlier that year had killed an estimated 100,000 people and destroyed 16 square miles of the city. Allied Command was now finalizing Operation Downfall, a massive two-part invasion of the Japanese home islands. Planners expected the defense to include millions of Japanese soldiers and a civilian militia of 28 million, leading to casualty predictions that ran into the millions. This projected cost drove the search for a way to force an immediate surrender without a mainland invasion. The solution lay in a top-secret project that was about to move from the laboratory to the battlefield. The Manhattan Project was a massive industrial and scientific undertaking, originally accelerated by fears that Nazi Germany was already developing its own atomic weapons. Harnessing nuclear fission required an enormous logistical footprint. At its peak, the project cost over $2 billion and employed 125,000 people across dozens of secret sites, producing enough uranium and plutonium for a viable bomb. Two distinct designs emerged. Little Boy was a gun-type weapon, firing one piece of uranium into another to trigger a chain reaction. The second, Fat Man, was far more complex, relying on a spherical arrangement of explosives firing inward to compress a plutonium core. On July 26, 1945, Allied leaders issued the Potsdam Declaration, outlining the terms for Japan's surrender. They issued a final warning. The alternative to compliance would be prompt and utter destruction. When the Japanese government chose to ignore the ultimatum, the focus shifted to the 509th Composite Group on Tinian Island. The atomic bomb was no longer a scientific achievement. It was a deployed military asset. At 2:45 a.m. on August 6th, the B-29 Enola Day took off from Tinian. Its mission was to deliver Little Boy to the first of 4 potential targets. Hiroshima was chosen because of its size and its significance as a military depot and port. Crucially, it had been left untouched by previous firebombing raids, so that the damage caused by a single atomic blast could be accurately assessed. The bomb detonated at 8:15 a.m., 1,900 feet above the city. Those on the ground experienced a pika, a brilliant flash of light, followed by a dawn, the booming sound of a shockwave that leveled buildings within a 1-mile radius and started a massive firestorm. The human cost was catastrophic. Out of a population of roughly 350,000, between 90,000 and 166,000 died by the end of the year. Nearly 90% of the dead were civilians, including thousands of students mobilized for work in the city center. In a single second, over 4 square miles of the city had been reduced to a scorched, flat landscape. The scale of the destruction redefined the limits of warfare. 3 days later, the mission to Nagasaki was far more chaotic. The bomber boxcar faced mechanical failures and severe weather, missing its rendezvous and burning critical fuel before it even reached Japan. Thick cloud cover over the primary target, Kokura, forced the crew to move to their secondary target. With fuel running so low they would be forced to land on Okinawa, they released the Fat Man weapon over Nagasaki. The bomb exploded at 11:02 a.m. It was more powerful than the Hiroshima blast, but its effects were largely confined to the industrial Urakami Valley. By chance, it detonated almost directly over the factory that had produced the torpedoes used in the attack on Pearl Harbor. The strike killed up to 80,000 people. For the Japanese leadership, it proved that the Hiroshima bombing was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a systematic campaign of annihilation. Below the mushroom clouds, the survivors, known as hibakusha, faced a new and unrecognizable reality. Many who appeared to have escaped the blast uninjured began to succumb within days to horrific internal damage. They were the first to experience the lingering effects of a nuclear strike: radioactive black rain, severe thermal burns, and radiation sickness. The twin bombings, combined with a sudden Soviet declaration of war and the invasion of Manchuria, broke the deadlock within the Japanese Supreme Command. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito spoke to the nation by radio, announcing Japan's surrender. It was the first time the Japanese public had ever heard the voice of their emperor. These signatures officially ended the deadliest conflict in human history, but they also confirmed a new reality. For the first time, a single decision could now result in the end of civilization. The decision to use these weapons remains one of the most intense debates in modern history. Supporters of the decision maintain that the bombings brought a swift end to a war that would otherwise have cost millions of Allied and Japanese lives during a mainland invasion. Critics argue the strikes were entirely unnecessary, asserting that Japan was already on the brink of collapse due to the naval blockade, and that the use of nuclear weapons on civilian populations was a war crime. Regardless of the side taken, this moral fracture became a pillar of modern geopolitics, a world order now balanced on the threat of absolute atrocity. The American monopoly on the bomb was short-lived, and the fragile alliance between the US and the Soviet Union quickly dissolved into the Cold War. This map shows the rapid proliferation of nuclear warheads that followed. As more nations joined the nuclear club, the strategic focus shifted to mutually assured destruction, the idea that no one can win a war if it results in the total annihilation of both sides. This doctrine created a central paradox, often called the long peace. While thousands of smaller conflicts have been fought since 1945, the major world powers have never fought each other directly, operating under the theory that any direct confrontation would inevitably lead to a nuclear exchange. Neither side could survive. Today, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are thriving modern cities, but the physical ruins that remain are permanent testaments to human resilience and haunting reminders of our capacity for self-extinction.